Now, when I have complex numbers and I'm dividing, what I'm going to do is what they call multiplying by the conjugate of the denominator. On the conjugate of the denominator, you use the opposite of whatever's in front of the I. Okay? So in this case, I'm going to multiply both the top and the bottom by a positive 4i. Since there's a negative 4i on the bottom, I'm going to multiply by the opposite, positive 4i. Now on the top, I'm going to have to use my distributive property then. So, 4i times minus 5 would be minus 20i. 4i times a minus 3i is a minus 12i squared. Guess what we're going to do with that I squared?
You're going to subtract.
We're going to, not subtract, but we're going to substitute in negative 1, right? And then a negative times a negative is going to make that a positive 12. So we have negative 20i plus 12. However, we know that that's not the order we want it in, right? So we're going to switch it around and make it 12 minus 20i. Right? Because we want the number first and the I part on the end. I haven't done the bottom part yet. I just did the top part. On the bottom part, we have a negative 4i times a positive 4i, right? Negative 4i times positive 4i would be negative 16i squared. And what are we going to do with the I squared?
We are going to do minus 1.
Substitute in our minus 1. We're going to have a negative times a negative, which is going to give us a positive 16. So, this is what we have so far. 12 minus 20i over 16. What they're going to do is, because they want it in standard form, is put each of those separately. So they're going to write it as 12 sixteenths minus 20 sixteenths, and the I is going to go behind that. So they just made two separate fractions,
Okay.
the 12 over 16 and the minus 20 over 16. And of course, if we have fractions, guess what they're going to do? Reduce it to lowest terms. So, 12 and 16 are both divisible by 4. 12 divided by 4 is 3. 16 divided by 4 is 4. So 12 sixteenths is 3/4. Minus 20 and 16 are again both divisible by 4. So I'm going to have 5/4 I. So my answer in standard form will be 3/4 minus 5/4 I. Now, notice the next one looks a little bit different than the first one, because the first one just had an I on the bottom. Now we have two terms on the bottom. When I multiply by what's called the conjugate, I'm only changing the sign of the one in front of the I. So I'm going to multiply by negative 2 plus 5i. If I do it on the top, I also have to do it on the bottom. Which means I'm going to end up doing a bunch of foiling. So only change the sign of the term in front of the I on that bottom. So I'm going to then...
No, I'm not going to get these ones.
Oh, I'm going to FOIL that out. So 4 times negative 2 would be negative 8. 4 times 5i is 20i. Doing the inside, negative 2i times negative 2. Negative times a negative is a positive 4i. Negative 2i times a positive 5i. Negative 10i to the second power. I have an I squared. If I have an I squared, I'm going to put a negative 1 in there. Negative 10 times negative 1 is going to make that a plus 10 instead of a minus 10, right? So, putting that in standard form, I have negative 8 plus 10, which is 2. 20i plus 4i, which is 24i. Okay? So just foiling it out like we did on those previous problems. Now we got to foil out the bottom part. So, negative 2 times negative 2, positive 4. Negative 2 times a positive 5i would be negative 10i. Negative 5i times negative 2, positive 10i. Negative 5i times a positive 5i, negative 25i squared. Again, we've got that I squared. We're going to put a negative 1 in its spot. And then we're going to say, oh, I've got a negative times a negative. That's going to make that a plus 25. So, on the bottom of that fraction, what are we going to get?
We're going to get 29. 10 minus 10 plus negative 10 plus 10 equals 0 squared.
0. We just get 0, right? 0 anything is just 0. They cancel out. That's the reason that we used opposite signs in the middle, so that when we foiled, it would cancel out the middle term. So on the bottom, we just get a 29. So now we have to put that in standard form. So in standard form, we're going to have 2 over 29 plus 24 over 29i. And we can't simplify either of those two fractions, so we're done. Okay? And number 15 here. We want to simplify that fraction. We've got 5 plus 6i down on the bottom. What should we multiply by?
I.
We're going to use 5 minus 6i.
5 minus.
So we have the same two terms, we just have the opposite sign in the middle, the opposite sign in front of our I term. So on the top part of that, we just are going to use our distributive property, right? Since there's only one term. So 6i times 5 would give me
30i.
30i. 6i times, okay, minus
36i squared.
And what are we going to do with the I squared?
We are going to put negative 1.
And a negative times a negative makes that a
Positive.
positive. So we have 30i plus 36, but we know we want it in standard form, so we're going to write it as 36 plus 30i, right? Switch it around, so the numbers first. Now we got to FOIL out the bottom, because on the bottom we have two terms on both of them. So FOILing that out, we would get
25.
25.
And then 36, negative 36i squared.
So you skipped a few things in between.
did I?
Not that they're not going to cancel out, but when you FOIL, you took the 5 times the 5, right?
Yeah.
Then I've got to do the 5 times the
6.
minus 6i, right? So that's going to be minus 30i. Then we do the inside pair. The inside pair is going to give us plus 30i. And then we can do the 6 times the minus 6. So minus 36i squared. Because what happened, you can see, is, oh, my i's do cancel out of there. They will be gone. And we're going to put negative 1 in for our I squared. So that's going to make that a positive 36. So on the bottom of our fraction, we're going to have 25 plus 36. Must be about 61, right?
Yep.
So our answer in standard form, we're going to have 36 over 61 plus 30 over 61i. And again, we can't reduce our fractions, so that's going to be it.
Does it matter? I mean, like, I know, geez, what was I working on last night? And I didn't know, like, when you had no solution, you couldn't put it in those parentheses
Oh, you were
And I
doing
kept
set
getting my
builder
answers
notation.
wrong.
Yep.
until, I don't know.
So yes, if it's a no solution or an empty set, you just put that, you don't need the brackets or parentheses around it. It's just no solution.